Hello and welcome to the Passion Driven Pioneers interview series. I'm your host, John Channon, and today I'm joined by Paige Wittman, who is the owner of Miller Wittman Retail Design Group. Paige, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Would you like to just kind of kick us off with a little bit of a brief background as to who you are, what you do, and then the business that you're in?
Yeah, for sure. Well, as you know, my name is Paige Wittman, and I am the owner of the Miller Wittman Retail Design Group. My whole career has been spent working with independent dealers. I started out my career working at an advertising agency where Goodyear was my client, and I started meeting retailers who owned their own businesses, and then I also worked with our company-owned stores at that time. And so I really started to understand um, the needs of the retailer and the local market strategy. And so um, from the advertising agency, I went to work for Goodyear and spent a ton of time with field sales out in the Goodyear San Leandro office. Spent a lot of time working on developing markets and working with those retailers on what their needs were. And from that, I got recruited to go to work for Polaris. And at Polaris, I continued to work with dealers. It was an independent dealer network. And I continued my journey in field sales. And what I really had to find when I was at Goodyear or I was at Polaris was that a lot of my colleagues had grown up in either racing or field service or something. And so I had to really find what I was going to be good at. And what I was good at was figuring out the needs of the brand and the needs of the dealer to figure out how to have mutual benefit and grow together. And so I spent my career at Polaris in field sales and then in distribution strategy. And that was when I became a part of a group of folks who developed the retail store design program for Polaris. And while I was there, which will tie to Miller Wittman, is the Miller Design Group was working with us on stores there. And so we really kind of revolutionized what power sports physical dealerships looked like. And it was really more, they were more rudimentary than, say, automotive at that time. And the customer experience wasn't really considered prior in terms of an elevated customer experience beyond the kind of super fan of power sports. So I spent about a decade at Polaris, and then I got recruited to go to work for Andersen Windows. And while that seems totally different, it still is an independent dealer network business with complex distribution strategy, distributors, dealers, architects, builders, remodelers, and I was the vice president of sales there. It leads me to my next decision, which was I was at Andersen for about 10 years. And I started thinking about what the next evolution was going to be. And I knew that I was going to leave Andersen, but I wasn't sure exactly what that move was going to be. I was the final candidate for 2 vice president of sales and marketing jobs. But at the same time, I was working with my now business partner, Scott Miller, to say, hey, could this be an expanded business? Could we expand Miller Design beyond design and capitalize on the 3,000 stores that have been designed there? Could we capitalize on that and expand it into distribution strategy as well and go-to-market strategy? And so that was when we, over 7 years ago, expanded into the Miller Wittman Retail Design Group. And we focus on retail design, physical retail design, and distribution strategy, which is all of the things behind it and the dealer programs. I always say we've got the physical part with the retail design, and then we've got the basket of programs underneath it to make the channel want to pay attention and want to lean into that particular manufacturer. And so that was 7 years ago, and huge decision, but from corporate executive to business owner. But I had spent so much time with people who owned their own business. I had a lot of respect for it, and I thought I would like to be that too.
So you came out of the corporate world.
I did.
You had the working relationship with Scott Miller, it sounded like, for years before you decided to become part of the
Yep.
business. But talk a little bit about what was that transition like? Because it's very different in the corporate world than when you own your own business.
You know, in the corporate world, a lot of times your time is dictated for you, or a portion of it, right? I mean, you can block off time, or you can make some of your own schedule. But when you own your own business, one, no one's paying you a salary other than you, and your time is your own. And so you have to really think about, your day isn't filled with meetings that are sort of scheduled for you. I had to really think about um, generating revenue, providing value to customers, and really focusing on the balance between customer acquisition and doing the work. And that is vastly different than having meetings and, and having, here's my PTO, here's my 401k match, here are all those things. It's a totally different world.
Well, and talk a little bit about, when you joined the
Mhm.
business, you guys were basically expanding, as you talked about, in
Sure.
distribution strategies and things like that. What was
Yep.
it like at the beginning, work-life balance-wise, maybe, at
Uh,
getting that up and getting into a new market, essentially?
you know, the I had been coming from a situation where I'd traveled about 50 to 60% of the time, and I commuted pretty heavily. And so I had kind of a block of time that I could reallocate um, to really focusing on what the business was going to be. And before we could get out there and do all of the prospecting, is we had to be able to articulate what our goals were, redesign a website, talk about our value proposition and be able to articulate that, develop a capabilities presentation. We had to get really focused on what we were selling and what we were providing of value to our customers before we could jump out there and do it. But the discipline of the time was critical, right? I am going to spend X amount of time working specifically on the website. I'm going to work specifically on the capabilities presentation. I'm going to get really crystal clear on all of these things. And it takes discipline because, honestly, nobody's making you do it. You have a business partner, but you're not like beating on each other to do it. You have to find the internal fortitude to do it.
That's a good answer. I appreciate that. So in your business, right?
Mhm.
How do you stay open and adaptable to changes, and what do you use to remain innovative?
I I will tell you, it's in retail, and the retail side and the physical design, there are massive changes going on in terms of technology and customer journey. And so we have to stay very focused on looking at all types of retail. We tend to work in sales and service categories, things that um, take a lot of service after the sale, like motorcycles, power sports, marine, agriculture. Um, but the ticket price on these are very high, and the after sale service is a given, right? People are going to come back to these stores. So we do have to spend a lot of time looking at retail at all different levels, be it, luxury brands to transactional pieces. So we spend a lot of time looking at that and looking at the technology available and thinking about customer journey. And that's looking at all kinds of retail, because quite frankly, we have to spend a lot of time thinking about everyone's discretionary purchases. You don't need a side by side unless that's your business in particular. So we spend a lot of time looking at pure technology and customer journey and how to add to it, and and make it really value driven for the dealers and for the brands. But on the other side, when we're talking about program development, we spend a lot of time thinking about the economy and the current situation, what's going on in the universe in terms of interest rates, what's going on in the minds of business owners, and what problems we can solve for them, what might have changed in those industries. And so you have to keep your pulse on a lot of different things to marry up the retail design and distribution strategy. Because what you say has to be valid. Now, it's nice because we have a lot of clients that are tremendous brands that are very professional, that have tons of research and all of those things. So, it's nice to have that purview as well, because, they have good insight to give us too.
Well, that's great. Obviously there's a lot there to leverage that you guys are leveraging, and the relationships with your customers obviously are real key to all
Huge,
that. So
huge.
thank you for sharing that. I'm going to ask you the magic wand question.
Mm.
So if you could wave a magic wand, right, and change one thing about your business, what would that be?
I I just had a little bit of that conversation yesterday, which is, I believe that we could provide a lot of value to companies outside of the kind of categories that we work in, right? Is that um, I was, if I could wave a magic wand for other types of retailers to be open to us, I mean, we work with brands who sell products that are in excess of, 60, 100,000, $500,000. But traditional retail kind of will look at us and go, well, what do you know about handbags? We're like, what do you know about those kind of brands? And it's like, well, I understand customer journey and I understand retailers. I think we could provide a lot of value to those. That's my magic wand, is, having other types of clients be open to us.
You're just itching to get into a Best Buy store, aren't you?
Look, customer journey is customer journey,
I know.
right? And that, I think you get so pigeonholed into categories that you just want someone to be a little more open.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, I didn't mean to bring up Best Buy, but
No, it
the customer
100%.
journey can be entirely different than a
Absolutely. I
dealership.
mean, we tend to be in passion brands. I mean, like, people make decisions on a boat between buying, a big boat and a cabin, or a luxury automobile. And so, we have to consider a lot of different kinds of customer journeys. From the most transactional, I need, a gallon of oil, to I want a $900,000 boat. So, that can be challenging to articulate to people.
Let's talk a little bit about future. So would
Sure.
you mind offering us just a little glimpse into your future plans and goals that you guys have for your business?
For sure. I mean, you know, I think obviously we want to continue to grow and to expand. And so there's always the balance of the work, of doing the work, and prospecting for more work and expanding. Um, you know, I think our goals are a little bit like what I've just talked about in sort of the dream state, which is being able to articulate our capabilities, and what we can provide from a partnership perspective to an expanded group of customers. Um, you know, that that is a big piece of it. Obviously, revenue goals go with that, and and that type of thing. But I would say expansion into other other categories. There's complicated distribution strategies in many categories of business.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. So I appreciate you sharing some of those future goals with us. And so, knowing that this show is directed towards people who may be in the process of thinking about starting up a business or in their first couple of years, do you have any final thoughts or words of wisdom you'd like to share with our audience here today?
You know, it's even a conversation that I have with my kids, which is, going back to the idea of being willing to do something, being capable to do it, and then having the belief that you can. And you have to wake up in the morning believing that you have a unique value proposition yourself and that you have something to offer. Um, being able to specifically articulate what you're trying to offer and why it's new, different, and better, um, is critical. Um, having some capital doesn't hurt, right?
Yeah.
You need to have a little bit of a war chest to help you. And that varies greatly depending on the business, whether you have to have physical presence or whatever it is, that varies greatly. But I would say capable, willing, the belief, and then having the internal fortitude every day to get up and do it and devote the time. Um, I have in my family people who are writers, and, you get up and you have to write, or you get up and you have to do the work. But if you believe in it, and I was fortunate enough that when I said to my husband that I was contemplating leaving my corporate executive job and, running my own business, he was very supportive of it, right? He seemed nonplussed actually. And so the believe in yourself and the belief of someone else also helps.
Oh, that's good. Well,
And
listen,
a partner that you must have a good yin and yang, right?
yes,
If you're going to have a partner, you should have a good one.
well, that's great. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Paige.
Thank you.
It was great meeting you and learning more about your entrepreneurial journey, which is really interesting coming from corporate and going into the other world. So I appreciate you taking the time to share that. And to everyone watching, I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.